The day they cast me out, it rained like the gods themselves wept for me. I stood at the edge of the marble steps of Castle Varellin, bare feet slick with mud, gown torn from the struggle. My hands were bound, but my chin remained high. They wanted me to kneel, to beg, to shatter beneath their judgment. I didn't. I was born Lysandra Eleanor Varellin, second daughter to King Edrian and Queen Sarah, noble by blood, but never their favorite. That title belonged to my elder sister, Althea. Perfect Althea. Heir to the throne. Devoted. Dutiful. Everything I wasn't. I climbed towers instead of practicing embroidery. I read books on war strategy while the court danced and drank sweet wine. I was a shadow in the sun, always one step away from banishment, and when it finally came, I met it with silence. They accused me of treason, said I had consorted with spies, shared secrets, plotted against my own blood. None of it was true. The evidence was forged. The testimonies rehearsed. But it didn't matter. The court had already decided what they needed me to be. A scapegoat. When the king's voice rang out across the courtyard, stripped of warmth, it shattered something in me that had long since begun to crack. You are no longer of Varellin. By decree of crown and council, you are hereby exiled. Should you return, your blood is forfeit. They cut the family sigil from my shoulder with a hot blade. Then they turned their backs. And the guards shoved me into the wildlands with nothing but a threadbare cloak and the name of a traitor. I wandered for days. The royal forests beyond the castle wall were no place for a girl raised behind glass. Wolves roamed beneath the trees. Bandits circled like vultures. I survived on roots and rainwater, slept beneath thorns, and woke to frost on my lips. I grew lean, mean, quiet. Every luxury I had ever known became a memory too painful to touch. The first time I killed, it was a man who tried to take me while I slept. His dagger was sharper than his intent. I buried it in his throat before he could finish his grin. I didn't cry. I kept the dagger. And I kept walking. Weeks passed before I reached the edge of the ruined borderlands, villages once loyal to the crown, now turned cold by famine and forgotten promises. No one cared who I was here. No one bowed. No one listened. But they watched, especially when I started working. I hunted what others feared to touch. I climbed trees for medicine, leaves the apothecaries wouldn't dare fetch. I traded in secrets, in survival, in silence. And slowly, they stopped looking at me like prey. They started looking at me like power. Years passed. I carved a new name. Lys. No longer royal. Just real. But power always draws attention. And my presence had not gone unnoticed. One night, as I returned to my den above the old stone mill, I found him waiting. Cloaked. Masked. Silent. A blade at his side. A presence like shadow. I didn't speak first. Neither did he. Then he said 4 words that turned my blood to ice. They know you're alive. He didn't say who they were. He didn't need to. The crown. They were hunting me again. And the man in front of me, he was supposed to be the one to finish what Exile couldn't. A dagger in the dark. But he didn't strike. He just stood there. Watching. Waiting. And for reasons I wouldn't understand until much later, he let me live. The assassin left without a sound. But his scent lingered, leather, smoke, and something darker. That night I didn't sleep. And by dawn I knew one thing. If they were coming for me again, this time I would not run. The next time I saw him, it was at the edge of a burning village. I had come to trade for winter grain, but the buildings were already ash, the air thick with smoke and the stench of blood. I moved through the wreckage with a blade in hand, and my cloak drawn low. Bodies lay scattered in the mud. Some I knew, most I didn't. The slaughter was surgical. Clean. Whoever did this wasn't drunk on bloodlust. They were making a point. That's when I saw him again. Perched on a rooftop beam like a hawk surveying the ruin. Dagger strapped to his thigh, bow on his back, hood shadowing half his face. But I knew it was him. The assassin. His eyes found me before I could disappear. He tilted his head once, as if to say, I warned you. Then he dropped to the ground in a single breath of movement, not even disturbing the dirt. We stared at each other through the smoke. You're not supposed to be here, he said. Neither are you. He didn't reply. Instead, he walked past me toward the well in the center of the village. I followed, blade still in hand. Did you do this? No. But I was meant to. The wind shifted. My grip tightened. You were sent to kill them? He turned to face me fully now. I was sent to kill you. This was just bonus work. And yet I'm still breathing. For now. There was no threat in his tone. Just honesty. Why? I asked. Why let me live? He looked at me, truly looked, as if he were seeing something behind my eyes no one else had dared to look for. Because you didn't flinch. I didn't know what to say to that. He walked away before I could answer. I thought I'd never see him again. But I did. 3 more times. The first, in a trading caravan ambushed by mercenaries. I fought. He watched. The second, at a ruined keep during a storm. We took shelter on opposite ends of the same crumbling chapel and didn't speak a word. The third, in the forest, when I woke with a poisoned arrow in my leg and found him crouched at my side, binding the wound without a word. He could have let me die. Instead, he stayed until the fever broke. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at the fire, skin pale and damp with sweat. "You're not like them," I said. He didn't move. Just added another stick to the flames. "They took me young," he said after a long silence. "Trained me, shaped me, told me who to be. I never questioned it. Until I saw you." "Why me?" "Because you were royalty. And you were thrown away. But you survived. You became something they can't understand. Something they fear. And you?" He looked at me then, truly looked. "I think I envy you." The fire crackled between us. "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated. "Kale," he said finally. The assassin had a name. And for the first time since my exile, I felt the world shift beneath my feet. Not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to. We traveled together after that. Not as allies. Not yet. But no longer as strangers either. He moved like a shadow, silent and precise. I hunted, bartered, guarded the fire while he scouted ahead. We didn't talk much. But when we did, it mattered. He told me about the Order of Duskwatch, the syndicate that trained him, raised him, owned him. Assassins bred in the dark, loyal only to coin and command. They had agents in every major kingdom, including Varellan. They were the ones who killed the villagers. They were the ones who branded me a traitor. They were the ones coming for me still. And Kale was still technically one of them. I should have run. But I didn't. Because something unspoken had begun to settle between us. Quiet, heavy, inevitable. And if they wanted to kill me again, they would have to go through him first. Even if that meant he'd have to betray the only life he'd ever known. The first time I watched Kale kill up close, it was a thing of silence. Not rage. Not glory. Just the efficient stillness of a man who'd spent his life perfecting the art of death. We had stopped to rest at a stone bridge near a frozen creek when we were ambushed. 3 men, cloaked in the black sigil of the Duskwatch, blades already drawn. They weren't here for conversation. Kale didn't hesitate. He moved like water, no wasted movement, no panic. One fell with a slice to the throat. The second skewered clean through the chest. The third dropped to his knees before even realizing he'd been cut. By the time I unsheathed my dagger, it was already over. Kale stood in the silence, blood dripping from his blade, his chest rising and falling beneath the tattered folds of his cloak. "They followed me," he said quietly. "I told them I was done." "They don't take betrayal lightly," I said. "Neither do I." We buried the bodies under snow and stone. No markers. No names. Kale didn't flinch once during the task, but his silence afterward was heavier than steel. That night, we didn't speak. I cooked while he cleaned his weapons, and the fire between us felt colder than it should have. At dawn, I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. "Are they going to keep coming?" "Yes." "Because of me?" "No." "Because of me." I broke code. I let you live. Then I left. Now I've made you their symbol of defiance. Then we fight. His gaze snapped to mine. "You're not trained for that." I survived exile. The wilds. Assassins. I don't need to be trained to bleed with purpose. Kale stared for a long time, then looked away. "We can't fight them all. Then we bring them down another way." He was quiet. "What are you thinking?" "I was thinking of something my father once said," I replied. "If the blade cannot reach the king, you turn the cord against him." "You want to dismantle the Duskwatch." "I want to cut off their head." Kale's expression darkened. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then teach me." We rode east, toward the city of Dornhollow, a place carved into the cliffs beyond the old kingdoms. A merchant hub now, but once it had been a Duskwatch training ground. Kale said there were allies there, ghosts from his old life. People who disappeared or defected, men and women who might help us if we offered something stronger than gold. A future. Dornhollow was chaos. Smog and steel and steam rising from the deep mine furnaces. We walked through the streets with cloaks drawn tight and daggers hidden beneath leathers. Every alley felt like a throat ready to close. Kale moved like he belonged to the shadows. I kept pace beside him, my steps light, my eyes always watching. He brought me to a tavern that didn't look like a tavern. No sign. No windows. Just a steel door and a lock that required a coded knock. Inside, the air reeked of smoke and secrets. They were waiting. 4 of them. Rogues. Burned and branded. 2 had Duskwatch tattoos, slashed through with scars. 1 wore no crest at all but spoke with venom in every word. They didn't rise when we entered. You brought her, the tallest said. Kale nodded. She's the reason you're all still alive, he said. And what does she want? I stepped forward. I want to burn the order. Silence. Then low laughter. You and what army? Just us, I said. For now. But I have information. Access. Names. Why should we trust you? Because I was royalty once. And they took everything from me. I don't want revenge. I want to end them. The laughter stopped. Kale's voice cut through the tension. She's not like them. And neither are we anymore. Either we help her build something new, or we wait to be hunted down like dogs. They didn't answer right away. But one by one, they nodded. That night, we lit a fire in the ruins beneath the tavern. We spoke in whispers. We drew maps in soot and spilled wine. We made plans. Not for survival, but for war. Kale stood at my side the entire time, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. And when everyone else had gone, he looked at me and said, if we do this, there's no turning back. I know. They'll come for me first. Not if I get to them first. He didn't smile, but he reached out and took my hand. We'll do it together. And I knew, in that moment, that he wasn't just my blade. He was my turning point. We built the rebellion in silence, brick by bloody brick. The former assassins, Kale's ghosts as I called them, trained me by firelight in the deep tunnels beneath Dorn Hollow. I learned how to strike fast and vanish faster. How to read a man's intent by the angle of his wrist, how to kill without hesitation, how to breathe through pain. I was no longer a discarded princess. I was becoming something else entirely. Kale rarely spoke during training. But he watched me with a hunter's eye, correcting my stance with a glance, testing my limits with quiet precision. He never went easy on me, and I didn't ask him to. I didn't want kindness. I wanted power, and he gave it to me. While I trained, Kale and the others gathered intelligence. The Dusk Watch had expanded since my exile. They'd moved beyond shadows into politics, bribing kings and blackmailing ministers. They didn't just execute targets now, they ran nations from the dark. Their leader, known only as the Voice, had never been seen. Orders were delivered by masked agents, their words law. But now we had names. We knew who their enforcers were, where they slept, where they bled. And soon, they would know ours. Our first strike was a message. A raid on a Duskwatch vault embedded beneath the Eastern Trade Council. We wore masks, moved like ghosts. Kale led the entry. I led the fire. By the time the city guard arrived, we were gone and the vault burned. But not before we took everything: ledgers, blacklists, codes. The nobles who'd bowed to the Duskwatch woke to find their secrets exposed and their bribes scattered through the streets. The Voice did not respond publicly, but we felt the shift. More patrols, more eyes, more bodies hanging in alleyways as a warning. They were scared, and they were angry. One of ours was taken. Jaren, a boy no older than 16, eager and loyal. We found what was left of him tied to the gates of Dorn Hollow. Eyes gouged out, hands severed. A sign hung from his throat. The traitor bleeds first. I stood at his side in the snow, the wind biting through my cloak. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not here. Not now. I pressed a kiss to his cold forehead and turned to Kale. Burn it down. We hit 3 Duskwatch safe houses that night. No survivors. We left their emblem shattered, their records soaked in blood. And still, it wasn't enough. For every head we cut, another rose. Kale started pulling away. He said nothing, but I saw it in his silence. In the way his eyes didn't meet mine. In the way he watched me fight like he was waiting for something to break. We sat alone on the cliffs outside Dorn Hollow, the stars sharp and cold above us. I'd just come from a mission, my knife still stained, my voice hoarse. You've changed, he said. You train me too. That's not what I meant. Then say what you mean. He looked at me and for once, he didn't wear his armor. You're becoming what they feared. But I'm starting to wonder if you're becoming what they were. The words stung harder than any blade. So what? I whispered. You regret staying? No. But I regret what it's costing you. I stared at him, the wind twisting between us like a wall. They took everything from me. My home, my name, my life. I won't stop until they feel what I felt. And when they do, then what? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. He stood, his shadow stretching long in the moonlight. I'll fight with you. I always will. But don't lose the part of you that made me believe in something again. He left me there, alone on the cliff. And for the first time since exile, I felt something like fear. Not of the Duskwatch, but of myself. I didn't sleep after Kale left that night. His words echoed louder than any scream. Don't lose the part of you that made me believe. But what part was left? The palace girl who once danced in sunlit corridors? She was long buried beneath ash and strategy. And yet, when Kale looked at me, I wondered if he still saw her, trapped beneath the crown of fire I'd built on vengeance. The next day, I buried the question with steel. We struck the Duskwatch hard. A coordinated series of attacks across 3 regions. Kale and I split up. He led the southern strike. I took the north. By dawn, we dismantled 6 posts, killed 14 enforcers, and seized a shipment of Duskwatch armory meant for the Varellan capital. But it came at a cost. When we regrouped outside the Blackstone border pass, Kale was bleeding. A long, jagged cut across his ribs, deeper than I'd seen him take before. He collapsed the moment we made it to camp. I stayed by his side through the fever, through the blood-soaked bandages, through the muttered names I didn't recognize. He wasn't the ghost then, just a man, haunted, half-broken and human. He woke after 2 days. The first thing he said was my name. Liz. I pressed water to his lips. You're safe. You stayed. Of course I did. I told you not to lose yourself. And I won't. But you don't get to leave me just to prove a point. His hand found mine. Rough. Steady. Warm. You scare me sometimes, he said. Because I'd follow you into fire. And I'm not sure you'd ever ask me to stop. Then follow me to the end, Kale. And if I burn, let it be for something that matters. His thumb traced my knuckles. You already matter. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. But in that silence, something real passed between us. Stronger than loyalty. Deeper than vengeance. And when he slept again, I stayed awake just to watch his chest rise and fall, reminding myself he was still here. Still mine. The next week, everything changed. We intercepted a message from the inner circle of the Duskwatch, direct orders from the voice. They knew where I was. And they were coming in force. Kale sat beside me as I read the letter aloud. His eyes didn't flicker once. There's a traitor in Dorn Hollow, I said. He nodded. Or someone broke. I looked around at the people we'd built this rebellion with. Fighters. Healers. Former killers trying to be more than blades. Any of them could have sold us. I tightened my grip on the parchment. Then we move. We take the fight to them. That's what they want, Kale said. To draw you out. To cut off the head. Then let them try. We gathered our allies. Gave them the choice. Stay and scatter, or ride with me into the mountain citadel, where the Duskwatch ruled from the shadows. Every one of them chose to ride. Kale kissed my forehead before we mounted. I'll be behind you, he said. Always. And I believed him. We rode out beneath a black sky, the cliffs of the Duskwatch fortress rising like fangs ahead. My blade was steady. My mind was clear. I had no crown, no court, no noble name. But I had an army. And I had him. And that would be enough. The Duskwatch fortress loomed like a scar carved into the mountain face. No banners. No torches. Just stone, jagged and cruel, swallowing the sky. We camped in the ravine below, out of sight, while Kale and I mapped the terrain. He'd been here before, once, years ago, as a blade without a face, delivering a death that no one remembered. Now he would return not as their weapon, but as my sword. We planned the breach in silence, the way we always did. Leaned close over maps, fingers tracing blind corners and choke points. I could hear the hesitation in his breath. He wouldn't say it out loud, but I knew what he was thinking. Once we stepped inside, there would be no retreat. We were either going to end the Duskwatch or be buried beneath it. At midnight, we moved. For teams. Each with a purpose. Disrupt communications. Collapse the side gates. Destroy the armory. And my team, Kale and I, would find the voice. The fortress swallowed us whole the moment we crossed the threshold. Stone halls twisted like veins. Windows bricked shut long ago. Everything was built for silence, for killing. We moved like ghosts, blades drawn, feet soft on the ancient floors. Kale took point. I followed. We passed execution rooms still red with old blood. Interrogation cells where screams had been carved into stone. This place was more than a headquarters. It was a graveyard of loyalty. We reached the central chamber faster than expected. The doors were unlocked. Too easy. Kale paused. He pressed 2 fingers to the ground, then cursed under his breath. A sigil. Blood drawn. Fresh. It's a trap. I stepped forward anyway. So let them spring it. The chamber was circular, lit by 1,000 flickering candles. At the center stood a figure in silver robes, face masked in obsidian. The voice. You've come far, Lysandra Varellan, the figure said. You've bled, lost, killed. All for the sake of vengeance. I wonder, do you even remember what it felt like to be innocent? I stepped closer. No. But I remember what it felt like to be powerless. And what are you now? I am your end. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. Instead, he turned, and with a single word spoken in a dead tongue, shadows burst from the walls. Assassins. Dozens of them.
Trained. Silent.
Ready. Kale moved before they did. Blade flashing. Two fell instantly. I drew mine and dove into the fray. It was chaos. Steel against steel. Screams muffled by cloth. I fought like I was born for it. Not with the grace of a courtier, but with the fury of a woman who had clawed her way back from exile. Kale was a blur. Every strike a kill. But they kept coming.
Then I saw it.
The voice, slipping through a back door. Coward. I broke from the fight, ignoring the blade that sliced across my ribs, and chased him into the hall. I ran blind, faster than I ever had, until the corridor narrowed and ended in a chamber of glass and stone. The voice stood at its center, unmasked now, and I froze. It wasn't a man. It was my sister, Althea, older, colder, wearing the face of someone I thought long dead to me. You? Her smile was sharp. Who better to lead the Dusk Watch than the one who watched you fail for years? You were the one who framed me. She didn't deny it. You were always the threat. You, with your fire and defiance. They loved you more than they ever feared me. So I made them choose. You destroyed everything.
No.
I built something better. I didn't speak again. I just raised my sword. And screamed. My scream echoed through the glass chamber, but Althea didn't flinch. She stood there like marble carved from ice, watching me with the same smug tilt of her chin she'd worn as a child. Only now it was sharper, crueler, stained with blood and betrayal. I charged her. Steel met steel with a screech, so loud it felt like the air split in half. Her blade was twin to mine, forged in the royal forgeback when we were both daughters of the crown. I'd forgotten how well she fought. She hadn't. Her strikes were clean, deliberate, merciless. But I was no longer a girl raised behind palace walls. I was forged in exile, tempered by fire. We clashed again and again, blades sparking, breath ragged, blood soaking into stone. She moved like a dancer. I moved like a storm. You ruined me, I hissed between blows. No, little sister, she said, eyes gleaming. I saved the kingdom from you. You turned it into a slaughterhouse. I turned it into a kingdom that survives. And still, you couldn't kill me. Not yet. She swung low. I blocked, countered, twisted. Our swords locked and held. Her eyes were inches from mine.
You were always too soft, Lysandra.
And you were always too afraid to fight in the light. I broke the lock, stepped in, and drove the hilt of my sword into her ribs. She staggered. I lunged, but she vanished through another door, blood dripping behind her. Coward. I followed. Outside the chamber, the battle still raged. Kale was covered in blood, two more down at his feet. His eyes locked onto mine instantly. She ran. He nodded. We moved. We chased Althea through the fortress, twisting deeper into its heart, past vaults and old war rooms and long-dead torches. At last, she made her stand in the throne room, the place where the Dusk Watch crowned its killers. She stood atop the dais, chest heaving, sword lowered. Kale stepped beside me. Last chance, he murmured. Say the word and we end this. She looked at him and laughed. So, this is what you've become, Kale. A traitor for a traitor. He said nothing.
You trained him well, I said.
But not well enough to make him love you. Her face hardened. I gave the signal. The others poured in through the broken walls. My rebels. My army. We surrounded her. Althea stood tall. You've brought a mob to fight a dynasty.
No.
I brought the truth. I raised the royal seal, the one I had taken from the archives, the one that proved she had ordered my exile. The audience saw it, read it, understood, and they turned on her. No trial, no vote, just justice. It was Kale who stepped forward in the end, sword drawn. She met his eyes. Will you kill me? He hesitated.
No, he said. She will.
He stepped aside, and I walked forward. Althea dropped her blade. Do it then. Be the monster they all feared. I looked her in the eyes. I already was. I struck. Her body collapsed at my feet. And I, Lysandra Eleanor Varellin, stood where the voice had ruled. The battle was over. But the war had just begun. Althea's blood hadn't even cooled on the stone before the silence cracked. Not from grief. Not from horror. From relief. The kind of silence that settles when something dark has finally been uprooted. The fortress felt different. Lighter. As if the very walls had been waiting for her end. I stood on the dais, where she'd ruled in secret, and looked down at the faces staring back at me. Rebels, outlaws, soldiers, the forgotten and discarded. And I realized I was one of them. Not a princess reborn, but a leader forged in everything the crown tried to bury. Kale stood at my side, quiet, unreadable as always. I could feel the heat of him even through the smoke and ruin. The man who was once my would-be killer had become my shadow, my blade, my only constant. I turned to him and said the words I'd been holding onto since the first time he spared my life. It's done.
Not yet, he said.
There's still the matter of what comes next. The Duskwatch had fallen, but its roots were long and tangled. Varellan would need cleansing. The nobles who fed on the blood money, the corrupt who bowed in silence, they were still out there, waiting for someone to take Althea's place.
They expected a man.
A general. A killer in a crown. Instead, they got me. I didn't return to Varellan as royalty. I returned as reckoning. The throne room I'd once been exiled from was silent when I entered it again. The courtiers watched with wide eyes as I stepped across the polished floor in leathers, blades still sheathed in red. The king, my father, sat frail and silent on the throne. Time had hollowed him. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Lysandra, he whispered. I didn't kneel. You watched them throw me to the wolves. I had no choice. You did. You just chose to keep your hands clean. He didn't speak again. I stepped up to the throne and placed Althea's ring at his feet. Your heir is gone.
The voice is dead.
The Duskwatch is broken. I don't want your crown. I want your silence. And I want your army. He blinked.
Why?
Because we're not done yet. We marched on the remaining strongholds that fed on the chaos the Duskwatch left behind. I didn't rule, I led. Not from a throne, but from the front lines. The rebels became something more. Order from the ashes. Loyalty born not from blood, but belief. Kale remained at my side through every battle. We spoke less and understood more. There was no need for declarations. We had lived and bled and nearly died for each other 100 times over. Love, between us, was not a weakness. It was the reason we survived. One night, after our final campaign, we stood beneath the stars outside the ruins of a captured tower. The war was over.
At last.
Kale turned to me and said, "You don't have to keep fighting."
Not now.
I looked at him, at the man who once walked in shadow and chose light for me. "I'm not fighting anymore," I said. "I'm building." "And what are you building?" "A world that doesn't need crowns or assassins. Just people strong enough to protect what matters." He nodded, stepped closer. "And what matters to you?" I reached up, touched the scar beneath his eye, the one he earned saving my life.
You.
For the first time, Kale smiled. And then he kissed me. Not with urgency. Not with fire. With the quiet relief of two people who had survived what should have killed them. The next morning, I left the kingdom not as a ruler, not as a queen, but as a woman who had once been exiled, broken, forgotten, and who had come back to rise from the dark, to love without fear, and to change the world she was cast out of. Not with a crown, but with a sword in one hand, and his hand in the other.